Hello, chat. Welcome back to another episode of Misplaced Opinion, where I give my opinion on things happening in the Magic the Gathering space. Today, I'm talking about my opinion on the problem with Standard, an assessment of the current competitive Standard format. So, let's get into it. All right. So, to start, I think Standard is set up to fail. I think recently, in the past 2 years, there have been too many changes to the format, and it doesn't really allow people to engage in the format consistently and effortlessly. And that's really what you want with Standard. A lot of people are interacting with it at a local level, and these people don't always have a lot of time to play Magic. So you don't want to create a lot of hoops for them to jump through in order to get them to play the game. So with the Foundations release, the changes to rotation, the changes to Universes Beyond, and the changes to play and draft boosters, it creates a lot of dissonance for these people who are trying to engage with Magic and therefore Standard at their local level. And if they can't really do that, then they're not getting into the format, or when they get into the format, it gets very confusing and they don't stay around for very long because it's changed too much. My second point is that there aren't enough events to create a rock, paper, scissors meta. So when you go to your local LGS every week, you sort of understand what you're playing against. You might want to change your deck or try to target a few people in the room. That doesn't happen on a larger scale. It doesn't happen at Grand Prix anymore. And that doesn't allow people to actually want to change their deck list. It doesn't give people a reason to do anything different. So you just have, if there's one or two good decks, there's just those two decks over and over and over again. If you give people incentive, if you create more events, more money, or more prizes, more prestige, you're more likely to have people wanting to try to create new decks or try to change their deck list week to week. And this leads into my third point is ultimately Standard struggles to be a casual format. So when you don't have enough events, you don't give enough people a reason to play. And when you don't give enough people a reason to play, they don't engage with it at all. If you can't make Standard not competitive, if you can't make it casual, then you won't get new players in. And if you do get new players in, they won't stick around. There's not enough events. When there are events, it's a few of the same decks because people aren't actually trying to change anything in the meta. And when you give people the option of would you play the same thing over and over again for months, or not even for months, for months, but you only get to play 3 times, or would you play something where you can change it week to week, or you can have different options because there's infinite cards and you can play whenever you want. People are going to choose the one that they can play whenever they want. So Standard needs more events, and it needs to try to engage with the casual crowd more, so that you can not only get more people into the game, but have them stick around. To follow up to those last 2 points, another reason why Standard isn't super casual is because the Overpowered cards have a very heavy impact. If you take a look at the last bannings in Standard about a month ago, there were 7 cards banned. Now, that's a lot of cards. If you take a look at that as a competitive player, you think, that's a huge shakeup to the metagame. If you look at that to a casual player, you think, wow, why would I engage in a format where they ban 7 cards all at once? And if you think about the format now, we even have many people demanding a ban in the format because it's unfun. At no point would a casual player or a new player want to engage in the format at all. The card pool is too small, and there aren't enough powerful cards in the format to keep a check and balance for the most powerful thing currently. So when you have very, very powerful cards, they really destroy the format. I think this is one of the biggest reasons why Standard is failing, is because people see that the format is really dictated by 1 or 2 cards or 1 or 2 archetypes, and they think that sort of is unappealing. Now, I think that is inherent to Standard, like I said, with the small card pool, but I think that it has been apparently very bad recently because there's been too many cards that have been overpowered relative to the rest of the format. I think if you add maybe a few more overpowered cards to the format, it balances out, but it's really hard to do properly, and it when you power creep too many things, one thing normally breaks through and stands above the rest. My next point is that despite Standard being the imprint format, cards are hard to find for events. With the introduction of collector boosters into the Magic economy, a lot of people who were buying boosters before just for fun are now buying collector boosters. This creates the issue of not enough commons and uncommons being opened, but also way too many foils and extended arts being opened. So if you ever want your cards to be matching when you play an event, good luck. You're very unlikely to ever have that happen if you could find 4 in the first place. These collector boosters are filled with commander cards or secret sheet cards, so there's actually less opportunity for you to open a random rare or mythic from the set. This creates another issue of, the majority of the rares in the set are not expensive, but a card like Stock Up is $6 and really hard to find. I think it's easy to assume that you could find these cards, considering that Final Fantasy was the most sold set ever. There should be more cards out in the ecosystem. When the actual reality is, the reason it's the most sold set ever is because people are just buying them and buying them and buying them and not trading them or playing with them. They're just collecting them. And so if I want to find 4 of a card, I'm going to have a really hard time because the majority of people buying these cards aren't actually buying them to like trade them or play with them. This creates a really bad circumstance where you actually can't play the format you want to play even though it's in print. And if you do, it's very expensive because these cards are so sought after, not to be played with, but because they are a collector's item. It's really hard for a format to be healthy or to have a diverse metagame or actually have people engage with it in a meaningful way when they can't actually get the cards they need to play. If you can't play the format, like, how are you actually supposed to hold events, or how are you actually supposed to engage with it at all? And then finally, my last point is Standard is mostly played on Arena, so most people interact with Standard decks by copy pasting. Now, you probably think like, okay, if there's only 2 decks, can't you just build a 3rd deck to beat those 2 decks? Well, you can, but often that 3rd deck or that 4th deck or that 5th deck isn't as strong as the first 2 decks because the card pool isn't actually that big and the power level of these cards isn't actually that flat. You can't just build a 3rd deck and have it be as strong as the other 2. The other thing is most people just interact with Arena in a very casual, best of one way. There's not a lot of work put in, and there's not a lot of reason to put any work in. The other thing is, because the majority of people interact with Arena and copy pasting, the people who aren't interacting with it this way just see that it's repetitive and it's the same thing over and over again. So they assume that the entire format is always like that. And it is a lot of copy pasting, but they don't engage with it because they think it's like 80%, when in reality it might be 25 or 30% at most. Not saying that that's a small insignificant amount, but the confirmation bias is very high. And because of this engagement that people are trying to create that's very casual, the outcome is always that you don't get a good snapshot of what's actually happening in the format, and continually you'll just see the same thing over and over and over again. In order for Standard to be healthy, you need it to be diverse. You need to have people who are engaging with it want to keep engaging with it, even if it is a little casual. And because it is very copy-paste-esque on Arena, it creates a pretty poor play experience. So to follow this up, I have can this be fixed? And I don't know, it's like maybe. I think there are a few. So to follow that up, I have can this be fixed? And honestly, like maybe. I'm not hopeful, but I do think that there are 2 possible routes to fix these problems. There might be more, but I think that they are less successful or less probable with the tools that are in front of me, or what I see happening in the atmosphere, the economy, if you will. The 2 routes for fixing this are you keep standard as the local game store LGS format, and you sort of pump more effort into making it more engageable, or more fun or more casual for people who are trying to get into Magic in 60 card formats. This would take a lot of time and a lot of effort, but I think it is the most likely to be good for standard or for competitive Magic overall. The second one is you phase out standards, the main go-to format, and you try to use Modern or Pioneer instead. Now, when I say phase out, I think the best way to do this would to be have like a rotating Pioneer, Modern, Standard, seasonal thing. The issue with this is that Modern is pretty expensive to get into, and the depth of the format is very it's a very deep format. There's a lot of cards, a lot of things to understand. So it's really not a good idea for newer players. Pioneer is a sort of the happy medium between standard and modern, but it is very boring, and there's just not enough events for Pioneer. So you have a lot of issues for standard where there's not a lot of decks in the format, but also there's not a lot of events for people to try to change things in the format or try to approach the format differently. Standard does have its issues, but I think looking at it as a whole, it is the cheapest. It is newer, and that's what people like. And more importantly, it has the Universes Beyond stuff, so there's going to be a bunch of new players coming in. It's going to be hard to convince the newer players to like latch on to Modern or Pioneer when Standard is going to be the one showcasing all the new Universes Beyond cards, or all the new cards that they like out of whatever set that was just released. I do think, though, that it is an option to sort of phase out Standard. It's possible that Standard should sit on its own pedestal. Maybe it should have its own ban list. Maybe it should have its own sort of separate release schedule. I think maybe printing cards or sets through direct to Modern more frequently instead of through Standard is a better idea. Overall, I think trying to fix Standard or keep it how it is now for consistency's sake is the best. So to follow that up, how I would try to fix Standard. Standard is meant to be an entry-level format, and it's not right now. I think the format's fairly expensive for what it is. There's not a lot of events to be played, so I don't really know where the price demand comes from. That means that there's not a lot of cards going through, actually through Standard. Like, not enough people are actually playing these cards in Standard, because they probably can't get a hold of them. There's probably not enough product around. How are you supposed to have people engage with Standard if they can't get cards, or if they can get cards, it's just way too expensive? I know that it's really hard to fix a secondary market, but if you want people to actually engage in Standard, something has to be done. There has to be cheaper options. There has to be more entry-level options for Magic, for Standard specifically, for Magic as a whole. There has to be more opportunities for people to actually play with these cards. If I'm going to spend $400 plus on a deck, I want to play with it quite a bit. I want to use it. I want to compete with it. That's not very entry level if you're not doing that, I don't think. My second point is that the ban windows are a bit awkward for Standard specifically. If you take a look at other formats like Pioneer and Modern, their depth is a bit bigger. So the opportunity of a card breaking a format on release or a few weeks after release is a lot lower because there's so many more powerful things going on in the format. When you take a look at Standard and you have a couple thousand cards, maybe, every time a set comes out, you have a high opportunity that a card or two sort of like breaks the format. And this is specifically true recently where we had 7 bans, and now we still have Vivi in the format, and everybody kind of wants it banned. But there isn't another ban announcement for a very long time. This is specifically awkward for Standard because it functions differently than the other formats in a sense that if you want it to stay healthy, you need the power level to be flat. But the format's so small that you can't actually have the power level to be that flat often enough because there just aren't going to be enough options. Unless you just want to like power creep a bunch of things, and then you have the potential to just ruin other formats like Modern and Pioneer because you're just constantly printing all these powerful cards all the time. If you want like 5% or 10% of cards to be really strong in the format, that's fine for Pioneer and Modern because there's a lot of cards that already fit that 10% or 5%. But when you print those cards into Standard, you have the opportunity to just completely ruin the format. I'm not sure if the best way is to actually just have a more aggressive banning for Standard, or if it's to just print more powerful things more often. We are in a weird spot where the Universes Beyond sets sort of were shoved into Standard randomly. For example, when Spider-Man's coming out later this year, it was meant to be the Lorwyn set, and now the Lorwyn set is pushed to the start of 2026. So there's been a few changes in the last little bit on print schedules. So this Standard is not what was expected. Not all these cards were meant to interact with each other the way they do. All that being said, this is more of a reason to have a more aggressive ban window rather than to just like wait and try to implement more powerful cards into the format and try to power creep things up. I think the longer you have an overpowered format, the more likely you are to have people to never come back. They just assume Standard's unbalanced and that there isn't enough attention paid to it, that the bannings are sort of random or don't have a lot of impact on the format, and so it'll just always continually be boring and repetitive and a one deck or a two deck format. And finally, I think there just needs to be more events. I think that in order for Standard to flourish, in order to actually have people want to play the format more or engage with it, try to change it, try to approach the meta, you actually need to give people the opportunity to do so. You need to, when people don't have reasons to engage with the format, they just won't. And I think that Modern and Pioneer are sort of deep enough formats or have been around long enough that you know that they won't really quote unquote fail. Standard really needs the help. I don't think we need more Modern events, even though they get a lot more attendance. Obviously, it's very hard to just phase out Modern and be like, yeah, no more Modern. But in order for Standard to be successful and not fail like it is currently, I think there just needs to be more Standard events. I think that's the biggest thing for the majority of this is you need to showcase Standard. You need to show that it can be good, that it is a fun format, and that engaging with it can be fun. Now, that being said, with Vivi right now, there's not a lot of reason to want to showcase Standard. But if you don't continually showcase it, you just will always have people looking at Standard as this Vivi format. I know that it looks very bad right now. Let's say Vivi gets banned or Cauldron gets banned. There needs to just be more eyes on Standard. There needs to be more reason for people to care about Standard. There needs to be more. If it stays the way it is, it'll just continually be this sort of boring, expensive, not new player friendly format that I think it is. And that's the exact opposite of what I assume it's supposed to be. Like if it's not new player friendly, if it's not LGS friendly, like what is the point of it? Now to tie this all together, I decided I might as well talk about the wizard in the room. And ultimately, I'm not sure if Vivi or Cauldron should be banned. I do think that a lot of people are approaching Standard in a very lazy way. I don't think there's enough effort going into actually trying to fix or approach the format. All that being said, I don't think there's a reason to. I don't think that it matters that much. I don't see a reason to try anything else. I think Vivi and Cauldron are extremely strong, like very, very strong. If it's not the best thing and the best thing is unknown, it's definitely in the top two best things, and it's likely that even if there is another thing to be doing, Vivi is going to be better anyways. That being said, I don't know if that means it should be banned. I think there's always going to be a best deck. I think there's always going to be something super powerful. And I think that the Vivi Cauldron deck and the Vivi Prowess deck both are beatable. I don't think that they're extremely oppressive, but they are very repetitive and they are getting a very high play rate, which is very annoying and not very exciting for people trying to engage with Standard, specifically new players. I do think if Vivi should have been banned, it should have been banned before with the other 7 cards. I think this was rather apparent that this was going to happen, and if you wanted to avoid it, I think you probably should have banned Cauldron or Vivi before. I'm not really sure if I would have banned Vivi with the other 7 cards, personally. I don't think I would have. I don't think they should double down on a mistake. If Vivi should be banned, it just should be banned. I don't think it's like, oh, well, it's not banned, we should let it survive for a little bit longer. And this leads to the last point of, I understand allowing a format to flourish, but this is very punishing for the growth of Standard, and honestly it is. The last few events had a lot of Vivi Cauldron in them, and this just looks very bad optics-wise for the format and for Magic. I don't think that these formats, specifically the Arena Championships, I think it was, are a good snapshot of like the actual Standard Magic the Gathering format. They look really bad, and the people who are engaging in the format casually or getting into the format see this and see like 50% Vivi and just think, I don't want to play this. And I can't blame them. It probably should have been banned. It's funny because I think Vivi or Vivi Cauldron really exacerbates all the problems I have with Standard. There's been other times where there have been powerful cards in the format, and I don't think that they have really made such a perfect storm as Vivi has. I think Vivi being the last like really powerful card in the format, or noticeable powerful card in the format, is really causing a huge uproar compared to at least before when they banned 7 cards. You can argue that, you know, those 7 cards created 3 or 4 different archetypes. There's currently only one archetype that is in the format, and it is Vivi or VVX, and then other, really. So I think if Standard wants to be better, or if we want Standard to be better, more enjoyable, played more, Vivi probably needs to be banned. That being said, I don't actually think that its power level is that much higher than the rest of the format, or I don't think it is warping the format, or I don't think it's unbeatable so much in a way. Like, I think you could probably play more hate for it, or you could probably target it more. It would still be good, but it wouldn't be like obviously the most broken thing. In a different format or at a different time, if there were other powerful things, or if the format was a bit bigger. It just so happens that with the last 7 cards being, like those other 7 cards being banned, and we're just having a new set, and there's not enough events for people to actually move the needle or try to move the needle, that it just sits on top of the mountain and the optics look so bad. I probably would ban Vivi if I had the opportunity to, or Cauldron. I think banning Cauldron might actually be better in the grand scheme of things, but I'm not entirely sure. It's hard to say. Luckily, I don't have to make that choice. All right, that's everything. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, give me money. If you have any other topics you want me to talk about, or have any other suggestions, or if you just like the video, you should comment and let me know. Thanks.